Hello, everyone, and welcome in. We got a special guest joining us today with college softball regionals on the horizon. Justin McLeod from D1 Softball is joining us. Justin, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here, and we got a lot to talk about. This is the best time of the year for college softball fans, or even non-college softball fans, because this is one of the best tournaments. I think it rivals March Madness personally, and we have a lot of really great regional matchups. But I wanted to start even kind of before that and just talk to you about your thoughts maybe on the bracket here. I think a lot of people liked what the committee did. There was some question though about UCLA, Florida State, with Florida State getting the win over them in the regular season. So to you, were there any seeding surprises or anything that kind of shocked you, or was it pretty chalk?
There wasn't really anything that surprised me. I felt like as we got into the latter part of the season, we were looking at no more honestly than maybe 18 teams up for those 16 seeds. And truth be told, there was a couple that needed to kind of play their way in. The 16 who got seeded, I felt like were the 16 that should have been, and there weren't really any super surprises in the midst of that. I think you mentioned UCLA, Florida State at 8 and 9. I mean, certainly Florida State had an argument for the 8 seed, but I think the committee's reasoning of UCLA's wins just being better big wins than Florida State's. I mean, even with the head to head, I understand where the balance of those two weighs in the favor of the better big wins. So there weren't really any major surprises for me.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot of people had any issues. And as you said, it was really kind of a small list. So for maybe two teams who even could say that maybe that they had the chance to host. Other than that, it was pretty cut and dry. And that kind of leads me into looking at these regionals. There's a lot of teams that seem like they got pretty good draws. So is there a team that, from what you've seen, where you're just like, wow, they got maybe the best draw or the easiest draw that they could have been handed?
I don't know about easiest. I feel like when you get to the tournament, easy is relative. But I mean, I look at somebody like in Oklahoma, at the 3 seed nationally and all that kind of stuff, and like you've got a Kansas team that really was kind of a really a breakout team this year. Had a really solid year in the Big 12, and that's the 2 seed at the Oklahoma regional. And then you throw in a Michigan team that, granted, is very postseason experienced, but in the grand scheme, like they had a little bit of a down year in the Big Ten this year. And so, like, I think a regional like that, certainly, like, I'm curious what OU is going to be able to do against that competition, because that could be, you could see an OU power show with respect to, Kansas and Michigan and Binghamton. You could sure see an OU power show, for instance.
Absolutely. I mean, Oklahoma is a team that has been there, done that plenty of times before. So I would not be surprised. And on the flip side of that coin, there's a lot of really good teams, especially a lot of mid-major love this year. Is there a team that you think got put into a really tough situation, is going to have to work super hard to make it to a super this year?
I think there's a handful. I mean, I think right now the Alabama regional is an interesting pick. I think a lot of people are paying attention there because it's got Southeastern and Belmont. And I think, Maya Johnson at Belmont, and then Southeastern just being the scrappy team that they are. I think that's one that I think a lot of people are looking at. I think it makes for an interesting matchup, to be honest. Southeastern's familiar. They were in the Alabama regional, Tuscaloosa regional 2 years ago. Belmont was in that regional last year, did not play Alabama. So I think that one's one that at least has a lot of people's attention on it, just because of what those two mid-major teams have done this year and what they could do, against the number 1 seed in the country. Like that's a little bit of a tougher seed in terms of, or tougher regional in terms of being the number 1 seed. So I think that adds a little extra level to it.
Certainly. And I think the one thing for, maybe people who don't watch college softball a whole lot is one pitcher like Maya Johnson at Belmont or one hitter can really kind of take over a regional. So is there somebody or multiple players that you maybe have your eyes on that, yeah, you're telling people, hey, they could almost single-handedly win this regional?
Um, I don't know, to be honest. That's an interesting one because I feel like a lot of these regional matchups this year are pretty even keeled, to be honest. Like I think there's some matchups that when I look at them, I'm like, you know what? This is a pretty good matchup. It could go this way, it could go that way. I think that's kind of the theme for me of this tournament this year is that, I pull in Alabama, and you say that just now, just about the matchups that's there. But like in general, and I look at all 16 of them, I think there are some pretty solid matchups across the board. And so I don't know that I don't know that there's anybody that fits that bill in my mind, at least nobody that comes to mind right away.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the proliferation of talent across college softball has just gotten so wide. Like when you look at every team that's in the tournament, no matter whether it's seeded or not, nationally, they have an elite, at least an elite arm, if not an elite bat. And maybe 2 to 3, like at Texas Tech. We see a couple of elite arms. Oklahoma, we see a couple of elite bats. Arizona State, I think, is a team that came on very surprisingly to people with their performance in the Big 12 tournament. Kenzie Brown was probably a name that was going under the radar until she had that shutout performance. And in that kind of Kenzie Brown vein, is there a player or players that are under the radar, maybe that are not the big names like Kenna Day or like Carolyn Pickens at Tennessee that you're keeping your eye on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, for me, if you look at a couple of regionals, I think there are some players in those regionals for 2 or 3 different teams that make the whole regional setup interesting. Like, for instance, I look at an Arkansas regional that I think is one of the better regionals. To me, that's the most pitching heavy regional potentially for across all the teams, of course. And I look at an Arkansas that's got, Robin Herron's the All-American ace, but there's Peyton Burnham right there as a sophomore. She's done well. And there's been moments this year where she's looked like an ace. I look at a Washington team as the 2 seed in that Fayetteville regional where, Morgan Reimer and Sophia Ramuno, they've gone back and forth in terms of who looks like the ace. They've had their backslides a little bit, but they've been very good for the majority of the year. And even a South Florida that's a regional 3 seed, Ann Long, the unanimous American Conference Pitcher of the Year. And she's just really come on in the back half of the year, and she's been so reliable for South Florida. So, like, if you tell me, the Fayetteville regional, and you're like, oh, well, this happened or that happened, I think it goes back to, if somebody pulled an upset or if Arkansas ran the table, I think it's going to go back to somebody, one of those, pitchers that's kind of stepped forward beyond what they even already were. I think that's a good example of where some breakout stars could come from.
Absolutely. I mean, I think softball has been a game that is won and lost in the circle for a long time. And I think this year that is going to be more impactful than ever. And it leads me right into my next question too, because there are some teams that are really deep and have pitching staffs. It's not just one ace anymore. You have a pitching staff. So are there some sleeper teams here that you were thinking, in a seeded regional that maybe they're actually the favorites?
I don't know if there's any that I'm like, okay, I think they're the favorites, but I do think there are some where I think the host needs to play very, very straight ahead, very, very carefully to avoid. I mean, in truth be told, I look at some of the lower seeds in the top 16. For instance, LSU 16 has Virginia Tech coming to town. Virginia Tech has played in Baton Rouge before. They played their last year in a non-con tournament. Heavy hitters. Tiger Park's not necessarily super conducive to the home run ball, but Virginia Tech's a really deep, really talented team. So that makes that, assuming they both get through their first round matchups, that makes that head-to-head really intriguing, I think. I look at, A&M, Texas A&M, the 15 seed. You got Arizona State coming to town. And the easy storyline there is, Tricia Ford used to be the head coach at Arizona State before she took A&M. So it's like, okay, playing the old program, all that. But I actually think the storyline for me is that's a really good, a solid, gotten better down the stretch Arizona State team coming into College Station. And I don't know what that matchup's going to look like. Like, you've got Kenzie Brown. Mika Lupi has looked good at moments as the number 2 there. Certainly she had a very nice performance in the Big 12 tournament. She was Big 12 pitcher of the week earlier in the season at one point. So she's capable of being a very solid number 2 behind Kenzie Brown. How does that match up with the Aggies? So I think when you start looking, especially at the lower ends of that seeding, I think then it gets really, even Mississippi State going out to Eugene, out to Oregon. Like, Mississippi State's pitching has been so good for so much of the year. And even their struggles in conference play, like, weren't your general struggles. Like, you give up 3 runs and just the offense doesn't hit that day kind of idea. So I think that's where some of the ones where I'm like, okay, this is where I see the biggest potential upsets coming in really are where you would expect it to be in those lower seeds. And then the good teams that are coming to their place is what I call the high 2 seeds. I mean, there's some teams in there, those matchups could get really interesting.
It's going to be a spicy weekend for sure. And it all starts on Friday. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, Justin. I want to get, what is your boldest prediction for this weekend? Something that you think is just way out there, but it maybe could happen.
I mean, I think there's probably at least 3 regional hosts that don't make it to the super regionals. I don't know how bold that actually is. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think we had 5 regional hosts that went down in the regional round, but I think there's at least 3. I have a group of a handful. Like, there's not just like only 3 in my brain, but there's a handful that I really could see going down. I think we see at least 3 technically unseeded. So when I say unseeded, as in outside the top 16, not hosts, that come out of this round and make it to the Supers. I think there's at least 3 of them that I feel like are pretty good. That's a good number.
It seems like that happens more and more every year. So I also would not be shocked with that. And then my last question, I'm going to get you out here on this one. I want you to look into your crystal ball. Who ends up in Oklahoma City and who ends up taking the title? Does Texas repeat? Does Texas Tech get their revenge? Does Nebraska win their first?
So my preseason pick was Oklahoma. I still feel pretty good about that. The pitching certainly has been a little suspect, but I think they've come through in large part when they needed to. So I certainly think Oklahoma is probably who I'm sticking with until they show me they're not a championship team. And I think that offense is a championship offense right now. I like Oklahoma. I like Texas to go back. That Texas Tech Florida potential matchup in the Supers is really intriguing to me. I could actually see that one going either way. But I think that one's a heavyweight bout. I'm not sure that I think Texas Tech wins that. I certainly think they should, given what their lineup looks like, given who they have in the circle. But Florida's a well-coached veteran team. So, I mean, that one's where I hedge a little bit because I could see either one of those teams getting there. And, I think they're both good enough to get there. I like Arkansas, Nebraska, Tennessee to all go back. So pretty chalky in terms of the top 8. That UCLA-Florida State matchup, I actually tend to lean a little bit towards UCLA. Let's say that 8-9 matchup holds chalk and goes to LA. I like UCLA in that matchup. So pretty chalky in terms of predictions at this point, which obviously means there's going to be like, a half dozen upsets and I'm going to be completely wrong. But I think these top 8, top 10 teams are pretty close to the group that I would expect to see in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, the talent is certainly there for all of those teams, so I would not be surprised. We're going to find out here very shortly, so I appreciate you taking some time to join us, Justin. Looking forward to this weekend and really the entire month of softball because this is the best time of year. It's going to be a blast.
It surely is. It's my favorite time of year. It's so much fun.
As Justin and I both said, this is one of the best times of the year, and a lot of fun stuff is coming up. Can't thank Justin enough for taking time out of his busy day to join us here and give us some previews on these regionals. You can check out more of his work online at d1softball.com. They do an amazing job. I'm over there every day learning, reading, and researching to bring you guys this content. So thanks to Justin and the team. You can find the cards of these players that will be represented in regionals online at onitathlete.com. And if you pull any amazing hits, we'd love to see them and share them off right here on the YouTube channel. You can head to the link down below, onitathlete.com/highlights, and upload your hits, which we in turn will share on the YouTube channel. Somebody sent us in a post, and I plan to get to some of them in next week's video when we take a look at spring sports. So definitely make sure you get those submissions in before Tuesday. That way we can have them in the video. So appreciate everybody watching. Hope you're enjoying the regionals coming up this weekend. And we can't wait to see who advances and hosts super regionals here for our ONIT team. So we'll be back with you next week. Thank you again for watching, and happy ripping, everybody.